Holy smokes, it is here. UBI for all. Universal Basic Income. I didn't think I'd see the day, but I think we're about to encroach upon that. This is an episode coming to you this afternoon on this beautiful, amazing Wednesday afternoon. Right here in Nova Scotia, we're getting dunked on with snow. Hopefully you're doing okay in other parts of the country. But UBI, let's get right on into it, shall we? Me and Reg were talking about this just over a year ago. We saw how much the Liberals were plummeting, as we all saw, and we were wondering, okay, what is going to be their play? They know they have to stay in power a little bit longer to continue this crazy agenda to finish the job of putting Canada into the ground. How are they going to stay in power? How are they going to convince Canadians to get through the 2025 election and be able to maintain power for another 4 years? And what got thrown out in that conversation was universal basic income. That is how they'll convince enough people to go on with their crazy ideas. And we're just like, okay, yeah, I can sort of see that. A lot of people kind of see through UBI in a lot of ways, and they do believe it is true, too good to be true. So I was like, that's going to take a bit of a sell. I don't know how they're going to make that happen. And quite frankly, I don't even think the Liberals knew how they were going to make that happen. They knew they needed to. They knew that was going to be their final play, but they've been holding on to it. That's been the ace up their sleeve in a lot of ways. And then Trump got into power. And then tariff threats hit. And then we reacted to those tariff threats. And all of us who are of sound mind are looking at how Trudeau and company were dealing with these tariff threats. And we're just like, I don't think that's the way we should be handling this. This is actually making the situation worse. Why would we be trying to exacerbate these tensions from our greatest ally? Why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. This is so stupid and so arrogant and so ego-filled. We'll lose this 10 times out of 10. And then Jagmeet hops on last night saying, yes, I will continue on, likely, depending on what's put in front of me, we will push this government on to make sure we have payments in place to support workers who are laid off due to these tariff threats. And then that's when Reg and I looked at each other yesterday and said, oh my gosh, there it is. That is how it's going to happen. We're not even really going to get a say in it. They might try to use it as an election issue, but they're just going to go ahead and do it. That's what we're about to watch. It is very fascinating. I obviously upset by it when I realized it, but I was like, dude, this is how they're going to do it. They're going to exacerbate tensions with America, get Trump to put the 25% tariff on us, completely gut our working class, put people on EI, as Jagmeet alluded to. We need to expand EI, and we need to make sure we are, as we talked about in our episode this morning, how they're going to try and generate revenue and generate and print money to support people who lose their jobs. And that right there could be the UBI play. Right there in front of us. Why else would you try to push this? Why else would you try to make this situation worse if you didn't want to use this terrible catastrophe in our economy to be able to bolster your power? This is what this Liberal Party's done the whole time. But here we are. They're doing what the typical government does. Create the problem and then present the solution. Yes, we have completely botched all conversations and negotiations with the US. And yes, now you're about to lose your job, but don't worry, Canada's got you. We have passed this new program where we can give out money and make sure we are supporting the workers through this tough time. And unlike the pandemic, there is no promise that their jobs are going to be coming back after this allotment of time is over. Their jobs just going to be gone. And since this government has not been advocating for new industry to come into the country, has not been advocating for foreign investment, has not been advocating to export our resources, where are these jobs going to come from? How is manufacturer Joe going to pay his bills? And that is what we're seeing before our very eyes. These people are going to lose their jobs. No promise they'll ever come back to the country. And they'll be living on this new program that the Liberals have introduced. And Jagmeet will keep the Liberals in power straight up until October. And the Liberals will use this as essentially as their UBI play to maintain power. There has been a lot of conversation around, are the Liberals trying to drum up enough emergency to be able to push off the election, which there is precedent for that happening. Happened in World War I, World War II, and also various and smaller elections during the pandemic. Elections were pushed off. It can happen in Section 4.2 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and in Section 50 of the Constitution Act of 1867. There is a possibility that they can push off an election if there's a significant emergency or war that breaks out that needs direct attention. And how much do you want to bet that they'll try their best to make their case that this is emergency enough to push off an election? I don't see it happening because the reality is they will need a 2/3 House of Commons vote, which would be a supermajority, And the Liberals do not have that, even with the Bloc and NDP added together. And you throw the Greens in there, they still won't have it. So I don't see that happening, but they could try. But I think the more reality of the play is they're going to use this UBI or pseudo UBI they're going to introduce as a play to get people to vote for them in the next election. We knew this was going to be the play. We knew that this was what they're going to try at some point. We just didn't know how they're going to do it. And yet here they are. This is what exactly is going to happen. Which then swing in Mark Carney. How is he playing to all this? This is Mark Carney's wet dream if you know him. If you've read his literature, you know his history. His net zero programs have been abysmal. A big reason why banks have left them, because he's a walking cancer in the finance industry. Everything he touches is turned to crap. And he loves to take advantage and take credit for the 2008 crisis and how he came out of it, even though he had next to nothing to do with it. This guy's a snake. He's a liar. But he's a huge advocate of the same ideals that we see with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. A future where AI takes more of a front row. A future where jobs are eliminated in favor of automation. A world where humans are having less of a role in society and needing to find something else to do. And I know this is a little bit conspiratorial, but it's also what we're seeing right in front of us. If you read Carney's book, Values, there's some interesting ideas that he proposes in it. Give it a read. He alludes to a lot of these ideas of automating a lot of our world and limiting the roles of humans. I am very interested. He's actually coming out with a new book in May called The Hinge, Time to Build an Even Better Canada. I thought he was not a fan of slogans, but here we are. Time to Build is his big slogan. And it is the subtitle of his new book, The Hinge. And it says this: in this brilliant and timely new book, former Bank of Canada governor and best-selling author Mark Carney charts an ambitious and urgent path forward for Canada and the world as we collectively face a multitude of existential threats to our long-standing democratic traditions. We are at a hinge moment in history reminiscent of what the Allies faced at the end of 1941 when Winston Churchill was in Ottawa meeting with Mackenzie King, an age of uncertainty and rising perils that is reshaping global political, economic, technological, and social orders and overturning our day-to-day lives. The good news is that just as Churchill, King, and FDR would eventually swing what Churchill termed the hinge of fate towards freedom and prosperity, we too have agency. That's what his book's going to be about. I'm looking forward to May 13th. Comes out May 13th. I think we'll get more of a read on who Mark Carney is, who will likely be the Liberal Party leader at that point, what he has in store, and how he really does believe in gutting economies like Trudeau did, along with Stephen Guilbeault, in favor of the green economy that doesn't really seem to exist. But he wants to get there. And it's a little concerning. And I want to allude back to an amazing interview that the Northern Perspective crew did with former Liberal MP Dan McTeague. Those 2 minutes is very enlightening with how he views Carney, what his values are, and what he's going to try and bring to this already limping along Canadian economy.
Well, trying to find where this party finds itself on the spectrum has it at the far left. It isn't the center where we were, and it wasn't a party that pursued socialism. But this is a party that, and its apparent would-be leader, Mark Carney, would like to see systems like social credit. So in other words, reduce the standard of living in the country, have people driving around on bicycles in their 15-minute cities, which is why Stephen Guilbeault supported him, impose on Canadians hardship, the likes of which they are starting to experience and they don't like, while at the same time the rest of the world is passing us by, watching our economic performance, our GDP per capita drop to the lowest levels among OECD countries over inevitably. This is a man who represents continuity of bad policy. This is the face, the man behind the curtains, if you will, operating the levers on Justin Trudeau. So as the country has declined, a lot of people ask, well, where's this coming from? It comes from a man who obviously had very little interest in investing in Canada, a lot more interest in making sure that the things he doesn't like are invested abroad, whether he's a technocrat or not. I think it's important because he tries to present himself as being something that he clearly is not. He has no common sense of what people are going through. He is a person who has been lifted on a silver spoon, and I take nothing away from the fact that he's probably very talented in what he does, but he's not right suited for what is required in politics, and that's the ability to understand ordinary person's struggles. He doesn't get it. In fact, he's had everything to do with making the life and the ordeal of most Canadians that much more arduous and difficult. And so for that reason, he is an easier target, in my view, than Justin Trudeau. We know Trudeau was a bit of a goof. Never really had. All he had was the last name. But he's done some really dumb things. Mark Carney is very unapologetic. The very fact that he has Gerald Butts and Katie Telford and the same group of Liberals behind Justin Trudeau behind him, that should be an alarm, as well as his wife. And I don't like to bring in, our backgrounds, but his wife is part of the Eurasia group, part of the most militant of climate, catastrophists out there. Diane Fox, I should say, Carney. There's no doubt in my mind, these people are committed to their green agenda. which it does not include human beings in terms of their ability to make ends meet unless they're prepared to accept a significant decline in their standard of living according to what they think.
I suggest go watch that interview. Fantastic. Great job. I loved how they conducted it. And Dan McTeague was full of knowledge, but that is spot on. That is kind of what UBI would end up being, is accepting a lesser version of the life standard of living that you're used to. Say you're in a job where you're making $5,000 a month, $4,000 a month. Now you're getting laid off because of these tariffs. The government says, don't worry, we'll give you $2,500 a month, less, almost close to half of what you were making. But it'll be enough to live on as long as you're smart with it. You'll take care of your food and all that. And maybe you'll get lucky and maybe cover some housing. That is what I imagine Dan is referring to here. We're going to significantly lower your living standards so that you can afford to do things like move around and go on trips, and which would then increase your global emissions. The whole goal of this is to completely demoralize, deindustrialize, and deconstruct what we know as Canadians and the life that we've once enjoyed. And he said that there, Trudeau is a bit of a goof. He did a lot of dumb things, but Carney's been pulling the levers behind the scenes the whole time. And I go back and I'll finish on this one issue. A lot of what people say was incompetency or as an issue, as a problem, stupidity. I'll be honest with you. You might do one of these things that the Liberals have done over the past 10 years and say, oh, that was just dumb. That was just a stupid thing they did. They didn't know what they were doing. It's a whole other thing to do what they have done and say it's not malicious. You don't just cut Canada's main resource sector off at the knees out of stupidity. You don't just create enemies out of some of our greatest allies out of stupidity. You don't just get embroiled in countless scandals where you're funneling money to special interest groups and special friends out of pure stupidity. You don't chase out MPs who are challenging your recklessness out of straight stupidity. You don't continue enforcing a very unpopular carbon tax that people are very vocal that they hate out of pure stupidity. No, these are all things that were done out of malicious intent to lower the standard of living that Canadians were used to here in our country. So when Jagmeet came out yesterday saying, I'll entertain the idea of keeping this government going in order to support the workers. That was my aha moment. There it was. This is the moment. This is where UBI, or a version of it, they may not call it UBI, but they're going to introduce a version of it and then run on that in their next campaign for the general election. And when people are in so much pain because of these tariff wars, people who aren't paying attention to politics will vote in favor of the government that's giving them money and helping them out when they didn't have a job. I pray and hope that Canadians are smarter than that and they see beyond it and they see the recklessness that this government has done over the past 10 years and they're going to try and continue with the new face of Mark Carney. But that's where I really appreciate my friend Jasmine Lane coming out on X today, essentially more or less begging Trump to not put these tariffs on us because of what we're seeing happen within our country right now. She says this. She was reposting Yukon Strong's video and she said this is my message that needs to find POTUS. In my hopes that your goal isn't to just bankrupt our country to prove a point, please know that the Trudeau government wants a trade war that will hurt our people. By getting this, they'll be able to call in emergency powers and avoid an election for even longer. Please help us. And again, that last part, I don't know if I fully agree with, just because for the election to be pushed off, it will need a super majority, which the Conservatives will not give them in a vote. But what I do think is happening is they want a tariff war so they can bring in UBI and run on that in the next election. And essentially bribe people to vote for them and bribe people who are desperate and vulnerable to vote for them. And there's a whole host of things that the government could do that is not a stimulus package. And it's a list right here. Cutting business taxes and also cutting consumer taxes a lot versus borrowing and printing for stimulus. These are the different results you're going to get. And this goes back to, this isn't just stupidity anymore. This is nefarious. We all can see what the better option is here, yet they refuse to do it. They're talking about printing money and giving it out, further tanking our dollar, tanking the value of the Canadian dollar on the world stage, and further plummeting our country into absolute squalor. The more I look up on Carney, the more I look up on the Liberals, the more crazy I almost feel like I sound. Because the stuff they're doing makes me feel like I'm going nuts. But I will tell you, you're not going nuts. Because this stuff is happening, and they're just trying to gaslight you. And it's the gaslighting that makes you feel like you're going crazy. But that is how an abusive relationship works, doesn't it? I'm not going to fall for it. I'm going to keep fighting, keep pushing, keep highlighting these issues because I think it's important. No matter what cost, no matter how much they try to drag us through it, Jagmeet trying to keep throwing Canada under the bus, Liberals doing the same, can't let it happen. And in the same breath, we're going to have to put so much serious pressure on the Conservative Party to do what is right. Not just vote them in, but vote them in with a strong mandate and make sure we put the screws to them the minute they get off that mandate. But either way, we love you. Myself and Reg, well, we're going to be AMA tonight online at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Look forward to having you. Look forward to seeing you there. Have a good one. I'm out.